The figure was still there, standing beyond the trees, half hidden behind drifting fog. Harry stared through the cabin window. So did Leo. After everything that had happened on Raven Trail, the stranger was finally closer than ever. Then the figure finally moved. Instead of approaching the cabin, it turned and began walking deeper into the forest. The movement was calm, deliberate, almost as if it expected Harry to follow. For a moment, Harry hesitated. The cabin was safe. The storm was finally beginning to fade. But the stranger had appeared too many times to be a coincidence. If he wanted answers, this might be his only chance. As Harry turned toward the door, something caught his attention. The ranger's journal was still lying on the table. If the ridge held the answers, there was a good chance the journal held them too. Harry slipped the journal into his backpack. Then he grabbed his flashlight. The stranger was already disappearing into the mountains. If they were going to follow him, they needed to move now. The cabin door groaned as Harry pulled it open. Cold air rushed inside. The storm was fading. But beyond the doorway, the forest looked just as uncertain as before. A moment later, they stepped outside. The rain had almost stopped. The forest felt quieter now. But somehow, that only made it feel stranger. Harry swept his flashlight across the clearing. The stranger was gone. No movement. No voice. No sign that anyone had been there at all. Then Leo stopped. His eyes were fixed on the ground. Harry followed his gaze. A line of fresh footprints stretched away from the cabin, leading straight into the fog. Harry knelt beside the tracks. They weren't random. They were heading in the same direction shown throughout the journal. Toward the ridge. The place the ranger had warned about again and again. The footprints led away from the cabin. Harry followed them without hesitation. Somewhere ahead, the stranger was still moving through the mountains. And for the first time that night, they finally had a trail to follow. The tracks continued through the forest. Fresh. Clear. Whoever had made them couldn't be very far ahead. For the first time that night, Harry felt like they were getting closer to the truth. A few minutes later, something appeared beside the trail. An old warning sign. Harry almost walked past it. Then he noticed something strange. The sign looked newer than it should have. Harry moved the flashlight across the sign. The warning itself was old. Years old. But the wooden supports holding it upright looked different. Someone had repaired them recently. The footprints continued past the sign. Harry started to follow them. Then Leo stopped. He looked toward a narrow trail disappearing into the fog, and refused to take another step. Harry followed Leo's gaze. The trail looked normal. Maybe even safer than the one they were standing on. Then his flashlight found something hidden beneath the fog. The ground ahead had collapsed. Harry looked back toward the repaired sign. Then toward the collapsed trail. Neither discovery felt random anymore. For the first time, he began to wonder if someone was trying to protect people from the mountain. The footprints continued uphill. A short distance later, Leo stopped again. Hidden beneath a rocky overhang was a small metal box. It looked old. But someone had been using it recently. Harry crouched beside the box and brushed away the dirt. Inside were emergency supplies. Dry. Organized. Ready to use. Someone had an abandoned Raven Trail. Someone was still taking care of it. Harry closed the box and looked up. Something moved through the fog ahead. Just for a moment. A familiar silhouette stood higher on the mountain, watching. Then it disappeared once again. The footprints led steadily uphill. Step by step, the forest began to change. The trees grew thinner. The air felt colder. And somewhere beyond the fog, The ridge was waiting. The climb continued. The footprints never seemed to wander, almost as if they were following a route someone already knew was safe. Then Harry noticed a marker attached to a nearby tree. Harry swept the flashlight farther ahead. Then he spotted another marker. And another. Each one pointed along the same route, carefully guiding travelers through the mountain. A few minutes later, the trail curved around the mountainside. Harry stopped. Just beyond the markers, part of the old route had been washed away. Someone had blocked it off long ago, and made sure nobody accidentally walked into danger. Harry looked back down the mountain. The repaired sign, the safe route markers, the blocked trail. One by one, the pieces were starting to fit together. None of them had been placed there to keep people out. They had been placed there to keep people alive. A movement in the fog caught Harry's attention. He looked up. Farther along the mountain, a figure stood between the trees, watching, just long enough to make sure they were still following. The footprints continued beyond the trees. Then Leo led Harry toward a small shelter tucked beneath a rocky overhang. It wasn't a cabin, just enough cover to survive a bad night in the mountains. And it hadn't been forgotten. Harry stepped inside the shelter. The supplies were old, but not forgotten. A stack of emergency blankets sat neatly in the corner. Dry, clean, and far newer than everything around them. Harry opened the Ranger's journal again. The note suddenly felt different now. The warnings, the sketches, the marked routes. The Ranger hadn't been documenting mysteries. He had been documenting dangers. Harry closed the journal and looked ahead. The fog was finally beginning to thin. For the first time all night, he could see the ridge. It was closer than he had imagined. The ridge was finally within reach. Every clue, every warning, every strange encounter from the night had led them here. Harry tightened his grip on the flashlight and continued climbing. A few moments later, they reached the top. Harry stepped past the last line of trees and stopped. Beyond the ridge, the mountain suddenly opened up before them. The view was unlike anything they had seen all night. Harry stared across the valley. Now he understood. This was what the Ranger had been warning people about. From a distance, the terrain looked safe. But hidden beneath the fog were old landslides, unstable slopes, and trails that could disappear without warning. As Harry turned away from the overlook, something caught his attention. A small metal box sat between the rocks nearby, partially hidden, protected from the weather, as if someone wanted it to be found, but only by the people who made it this far. Harry opened the box carefully. Inside were several weathered documents protected inside a waterproof sleeve. Most were old trail records. Then he noticed a single folded page resting beneath them. The missing page from the Ranger's journal. Harry unfolded the page. The paper was worn, but the message was clear. The ridge had earned its reputation for a reason. Several hikers had crossed into the valley below after earlier landslides. Some never found their way back. Harry lowered the page. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The mystery of the ridge was finally beginning to make sense. Then Leo suddenly became alert. His eyes fixed on something beyond the ridge. Harry noticed it immediately and turned to look. Harry followed Leo's gaze. Someone was standing on the ridge. Not a shadow. Not a silhouette. An old hiker quietly watching from among the rocks. For the first time that night, the stranger was no longer a mystery. The old hiker gave a small nod, as if he had been expecting them. Then he looked toward the valley below. "I hope the signs would be enough," he said quietly. But some people only understand the danger once they see it for themselves. Harry looked back at everything they had discovered. The warning signs, the trail markers, the emergency shelter, the journal, even the footprints that had led them here. None of it had been meant to lure people into the mountains. It had all been meant to guide them safely through them. Harry looked at the old hiker. The answer to every mystery on Raven Trail was finally standing in front of him. But one question still remained. Why? Harry asked. Why spend all these years protecting a trail that everyone else forgot? The old hiker smiled faintly. Then he looked toward the valley. Because I wasn't the first person protecting this mountain, he said. I learned everything from someone who cared about these trails long before I did. The old hiker's eyes drifted toward the dark forest below. When the ranger was gone, people stopped coming here. The signs began to fall apart. The trails disappeared beneath storms and landslides. And little by little, the mountain was forgotten. The old hiker looked down at his worn gloves. So I stayed. He repaired the signs, cleared the paths when he could, and left supplies for the people who might need them. The work was never finished. But neither was the mountain. Harry thought back to the entire night. The footprints in the mud. The warning signs. The emergency supplies. Even the figure that kept appearing through the fog. At last, everything made sense. The mountain had never been haunted. It had been cared for. As the conversation faded, something changed. The wind felt softer. The fog that had covered the mountains all night was finally beginning to break apart. Far beyond the ridge, the first light of morning touched the horizon. For a while, nobody spoke. There was nothing left to solve. Nothing left to chase. Just three travelers standing above Raven Trail, watching the mountain wake up. Harry reached into his backpack, then carefully placed the torn journal page into the old hiker's hands. The journal was complete again. Not because the mystery had been solved, but because the story had finally found its ending. Soon it was time to leave. Harry gave the old hiker a quiet nod. Then he and Leo started down the trail. The same trail that had felt mysterious only hours before. Now it felt different. Familiar. Halfway down the trail, Harry stopped. He turned back one last time. The old hiker was still standing on the ridge, quietly watching over the mountain, just as he always had. Some people leave their mark by being remembered. Others leave it by making sure everyone else gets home safely. And the adventure doesn't end here. If you enjoyed this journey, there are more mysteries waiting ahead. You can continue the story by watching the full Harry and Leo playlist. And if you'd like to join us on future adventures, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. We'll see you on the next adventure.